Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum, and a very warm welcome. Today I stand here before you with a deep sense of gratitude, and I feel privileged to present as a keynote speaker to all the participants and particularly the financial giants, because to be honest, I'm not the expert in this area. Neither I basically have the subject matter expertise. But I still try to basically give it a shot to share my perspective from what Umar talked about. But before I actually move on, I would really like to actually pass my congratulations to Umar and the entire Hubble team, because I remember this was back in 2017 when Umar reached out to me, and I was in my previous role, which was I was heading sales at that time. And he made this proposal of how we can actually connect Unilever with the distributors about this B2B platform. And at that time, we talked about is while we are interested, but we want to actually make it a platform agnostic payment system. And we don't want to be associated with one banking system alone. And since then, it's been now 8 years, and I was listening to Umar. It's been truly inspiring, the way, himself and his team has actually really stuck to really building this B2B network. And the numbers he has shared is truly fascinating, because it's his sheer perseverance and his commitment to this entire initiative that has actually made the Hubble to now, mashallah, holding this kind of event. Now, I think so I just try to further build on it. I think so the idea was to ensure that there is no dependence. I've actually talked about the ecosystem. And what's important is we need to actually create something which is which promotes interoperability within the network. And we have seen what's been happening, and today I just want to share one instance, which is, again, back in 2016. We went to China on a business trip, and we were out in the market. And we went to a store, and in those days it was something very new that you go to a store and you don't have to actually make a payment, and you do the shopping with your barcode and you walk out without carrying the product. So there was an intern with us, and we were 5 of us from Pakistan. So there was a lunchtime, and we went for a lunch and we bought something, and then we paid cash to the gentleman at the shop, and he refused to take the cash. And he said, well, I only accept Alipay. Well, that's not the point. So the intern said that no problem, I'll pay on your behalf. So she paid on our behalf. And of course, we have to return. So it was around 150 or 200 yuan. So we gave her the cash. And that's where the penny dropped. She looked at us and she said, what I'll do with this cash? And I said, well, this cash you've just paid there. She said, I haven't touched cash for the last 2 years. And I haven't seen cash, actually. I don't know what to do with this cash. And for a moment, we were also basically a bit perplexed what to do. We said, okay, fine, why don't you take this cash and deposit in the bank, and then you can actually use your Alipay or WeChat Pay. And this was some 8 years back. That's where the China has evolved, where all the millennials, they have not interacted with cash some 8 years back, and they didn't know what to do with cash. And I think so here we are today talking about how to actually digitize the whole economy and how to actually create this supply chain cashless economy, and that's a huge opportunity existing here. And we have seen how China has completely evolved with Alipay and with WeChat Pay. And we've seen exactly what Kenya with the Safaricom M-Pesa has actually done. Have completely digitized, and they've actually digitized again some 10 years back. It's not a couple of years back. And we see this transaction happening. And lately we have seen what's been happening in India, where their unified payment interface, which we call it UPI, has now actually completely digitized the ecosystem. Today, 40% of their transactions are digitized, which is equivalent to around $2.4 trillion in value. And 50% of this value is now B2C. It means that the average ticket size is around 200 Indian rupees. So you can imagine that what's been happening in our neighboring country at the pace it's happened. And I think so we shouldn't be surprised seeing the same thing in Pakistan, the amount of activities that's taking place. And as actually Umar has mentioned, one party which really worth mentioning is the way State Bank of Pakistan have really leaned in, and the way that we have promoted the whole digitization piece. And I think so we have seen it with Rast, we have seen with the licenses being granted to the digital bank at the beginning of the year. We have seen the way the digital wallets, be it Jazz Cash, be it Easy Pasa, being promoted. And lately the fintech industry where the, say, Finja or Naya Pay or Sada Pay really actually digitizing the whole digital wallets. So we're seeing that evolution happening in the country. And the best part is, like for example, last week there was a carpenter at my place, he did some work, and he told me, sir, आप ये पैसे जो है ना मेरे digital wallet पर transfer कर दें, आप मुझे cash ना दें. And that's where this digitization is happening. And interestingly, more the people which are actually lower the socioeconomic bracket, they're actually digitizing, because it's not easy for them to actually open the account with the commercial banks, but it's much easier to actually open the digital wallets with Easy Pesa or with Jazz Cash or with Sada Pay or Naya Pay or Finja, and like many all the wallets. And there's a lot of, this change is happening at the lower end of the socioeconomic class. While it's great to basically paint this rosy picture that has been taking place, with all this digitization and the license for the digital banks and these digital wallets, what's important that there are certain challenges all the way. And the challenges is that even today, the size of the cash economy is massive and it's getting big. Today, and we all know, the cash in circulation is around 9.2 trillion rupees, which is equivalent to around 30% of the entire supply of money in our market, which is equivalent to 11% of the GDP. Usually the country of our dynamics, the cash in circulation is usually the 5% of the GDP. So, it's not great, but still want to say that, unfortunately in Pakistan, cash is still the king, and it's growing. And that's a worry that how we need to actually bring cash as a part of the documented economy. And therefore, there are three key areas that's important in this entire journey. One is technology. The other is the technology, literacy with technology. The other is the infrastructure, and the third is the mindset. Now, if I were to talk from a Unilever's perspective, we are practically trying to sell our product across the country, across all the metro towns and around 58,000 villages in the country. We reach out to around 300,000 small stores directly through our distributors, through our salesmen. And when I go into the market, what is at times surprising that, many of these salesmen are not aware of this entire revolution that's taking place. And to start with, because they are still basically doesn't have a smartphone to have the access of this digital transaction. So they don't have the literacy. It's not that they don't want to use it. They want to use it, but they don't know how to experience it. So first thing we need to do is to really make these people in the lowest chain of the socioeconomic class, to make them experience how smooth and how seamless this entire transaction is taking place. The second bit is the infrastructure. Given that we basically go and want to operate in the bustling cities of Pakistan and so as the picturesque rural part of the country, often the challenge is that there's no network, there's no power, there are no internet facilities, there's no internet connection. So while there may be a desire and the urge by our distributor and by the salesman and by the retailer to use this facility, but they can't because there's no infrastructure available. And therefore, that's equally important if you really want to digitize the whole, supply chain in this end-to-end process. And finally, it's the mindset. You may have the infrastructure, you may have the literacy, but they may have the resistance because parting with cash is not that easy. But we have seen how things have changed in the past. I think so 5, 6, 7 years back, we used to basically use those physical maps when we used to travel across, and we used to carry those maps, meandering through those streets. Today, there's no such physical maps being sold, let alone being used. And we have all used to Google Maps. Yeah? Even, person who is basically a taxi driver, or even someone who is completely illiterate, he knows how to use the digital map. Likewise, there were days we used to get out of our house, stand on the street, and then basically, wave our hand to get the taxi. It's completely digitized. Now we actually book a taxi through our Uber or a Careem platform. So yes, the mindset has changed, and we need to actually change mindset here as well. And that's critical, because these three things are together will change the overall dynamics of really digitizing the whole supply chain. And finally, as Umar talked about, that at Unilever we are trying to digitize the whole process. And the whole concept is how we completely digitize the non-value added activities. Yeah. All those repetitive activities which machine can do, we want to digitize. And when Umar came to us with this proposal, interestingly, around 5 years back, we've already moved to a system called SIDA, which was back in 2010. And SIDA is Standard Instruction for Digital Payment. So what used to happen, we used to get signed checks from our distributors. So whenever we used to ship the product, हमारे पास उनका साइन चेक होता था, वो हम जाके बैंक में प्रेजेंट कर लेते थे और वो डेबिट हो जाता था. And then we picked up initiative with Standard Chartered Bank back in 2011 that, listen, we want to digitize it. Why every distributor, which are 300 distributors, their cash books, checkbooks used to be with us, the signed one. So जब order place होता था, हम value लिखते थे, उसको जाके बैंक में present करते थे. And then we said we want to digitize it. So at that time, only Standard Chartered leaned in. They said, okay, fine, we'll digitize this. So the distributor would have a SIDA arrangement where it was a standard instruction to debit their account whenever the product is shipped. So we actually completely digitized back in 2011 this B2B piece. But it was only one bank. It was not agnostic. And since then, we have really worked, and now we actually work with HBL and Mizan and MCB. And I think so what Umar has done is completely digitize that piece, and the beauty is it's bank agnostic. Yeah? If irrespective you are working with any bank, you don't have to change the bank. At that time, you have to actually change the bank. So we forced all our distributors to change the bank to Standard Chartered. Even if they're working with MCB or Mizan or with any other bank, because the SIDA facility was only available in Standard Chartered Bank, we forced them to actually change, and they changed. Yeah. And we all realized that the customer doesn't want to leave their bank because they have the relationships, and the relationships actually a decade or 2 or 10 years old relationships, so they don't want to change relationship. And I think the last 5 years, that's a tectonic shift that is taking place. And I think the kudos to Hubble team, the way they've actually created this whole gateway that irrespective which bank you bank with, you just basically come on to this network and then use the facility of B2B. So I think so to conclude, it's the very beginning of this cashless journey. It's the size of prize is huge. The potential is huge. I know Hubble is actually tapping into B2B, but I think so the real prize in B2C. When you actually go and digitize from a distributor to a retailer, yeah, and from a retailer to a consumer, it is happening, but still the people are finding it difficult to part ways with cash. And I think so one of the biggest reason is distrust. There's a lot of issues of distrust. The consumer does not trust the vendor that if I were to actually place order through my credit card or through my wallet, I may not get the product, and I will only pay through cash when I actually receive the product in hand. And that's the dilemma of our society, that that distrust has really kind of expanded, and we need to actually address it. And that can be addressed the more we actually build this integrity within the system, the more the trust we actually build, the more we digitize. And finally, the most important piece, and I was having this conversation with Dr. Saiba, who are existingly, our finance minister, is the way we need to address this low GDP to tax ratio, which is only 9% and even lower, because it's a percentage of the documented economy, and the undocumented economy is as big. So it may not be 9% tax to GDP ratio, it may be around 4.5% or 5% at best. The best way you can do is to digitize. And you may need to do it forcefully at time, and why not to go ahead and demonetize? And I know there are different varying views on demonetization. There are people from banking fraternity sitting here, but I think so. When we look at India, that 40% of the transactions are digitized. There's one step being taken by the Modi government 10 years back that became a case study, was demonetization of a 5,000 rupee note. Or not a 5,000 rupee note, that is 500,000 rupee Indian rupee note. And there's a lot of hue and cry. It does create a lot of ruckus. But if you really want to completely digitize the whole transaction, the movement of the cash, I think so we can really up the game on our tax, and we know what is the transaction that's taking place for each vendor. So I think it's a great place, and I think so again, thank you for having me here. And as Unilever and as a private organization, we'll continue to lean in, working with companies like Hubble and many other fintech companies that come in to promote the digitization of the cashless economy. So thank you, and wish you a great session ahead. Thank you, Amir, again for